Hello, this is Elizabeth, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of how I became a missionary in Japan. So, when I was a very small child, I was interested in Japan, and there's no logical explanation for that because I really didn't know anything about Japan. I didn't know anyone from Japan. My family wasn't particularly interested in Japan, and that was before internet existed, so I couldn't just hop on and look up stuff about Japan. But I just always remember having this vague fascination with Japan. And now I know that that's a love that God gave me from a very early age. And I don't know exactly how old, but I know that I was about 7 when my grandma got me a little wooden doll from a garage sale that she just thought was cute, and it turned out to be a Japanese doll. And I was really excited about it because it came in a box that had some kind of writing that I imagined to be Japanese writing, and turned out that it actually was. So I know that even from that early on, I was fascinated with Japan. So when I was 9, my family moved to another state, and we were looking for a new piano teacher, and by recommendation of a friend, found one. And it turns out that she was Japanese. And so I started taking piano lessons from her, and I was very excited that she was Japanese. And at the time, she had a daughter who was 3 years old, and she only spoke to her daughter in Japanese. So I was always listening because I thought maybe I could learn something in Japanese. So the first thing I learned in Japanese was chottomatte, which means wait a minute, because she was trying to give me piano lessons, and so every time her daughter needed something, she kept telling her to wait a minute. And so after I got to be kind of friends with her for about a year, I asked if she would teach me Japanese lessons. And she said yes. So by that time I was 11, and I started to study Japanese every week after my piano lesson. And she wasn't really a Japanese teacher, but she did the best that she could, and I was very excited to learn. So I did way more as homework and practice than what she assigned for me to do. And about that time, my mom saw in the newspaper an ad looking for homestay families to host Japanese exchange students just for 1 month during the summer. And so we signed up right away and hosted a girl from Japan for a month, and we became really good friends. And in fact, we are still friends to this day. But that was when I was 11, gave me a lot of chance to practice Japanese, the little bit that I was starting to learn, but it gave me some exposure to being around more Japanese people. And when I was 13, my teacher knew that I was very interested in Japan. I had been very diligently studying as much as I could the language, and she was going to be going home to visit her family. By that time, she'd had another baby, and she asked me if I would like to go with them to Japan. And of course I wanted to, but I thought there's no way my parents would let me at 13 go all the way to the other side of the world by myself, not by myself, but without anybody in my family. And I thought even if they let me, there's no way that we could afford it. So I didn't say anything to my parents right away. I prayed about it for about 2 months, and I saw something incredible happen. I just kept getting calls for babysitting jobs, way more than I usually ever got. And I saved every penny. I didn't spend any money on anything that I used to sometimes spend money on. I saved it all. And then later I started to sell chocolates, and I made crafts to sell, and I did all kinds of things. And a few people out of their kind hearts came along. My grandparents helped me out, buying more than just one chocolate. And I was able to go to Japan for the first time when I was 13 with my teacher and her family, and I stayed for 5 weeks. And then I kept studying Japanese. We kept hosting Japanese exchange students in the summer, and when I was 16, I went for a second time with my teacher for another 5 weeks. And it was during that trip that God really touched my heart with a burden for the Japanese people. It was on that trip that I saw how few churches there were in Japan, because I wanted to go to church and nobody could find any church anywhere for me to even be able to visit. And I thought, all of these towns all around this area, and there's no church, nowhere at all that anybody can even go if they wanted to know something about God, something about the Bible. And that started a real burden in my heart for the Japanese people. So when I was 18 and I felt like I was adult enough, I decided to move to Japan. And I got a job. I started full-time language school. I'd been studying on my own for quite some time, but I needed a visa for one thing. So language school gave me a student visa, and I was able to study very intensively. The classes were 4 hours a day plus a lot of homework, and I also had to work all afternoon and evening to support myself. And then during that time, I met my now husband, and we got married. At that time, I thought we would never leave Japan. God had other plans. We spent about 2.5 years after we got married. We left Japan and spent nearly 7 years in America. And then we went as missionaries to Brazil, which wasn't in our initial plans. And we're there for about 7.5 years. But we always felt that God was going to bring us back to Japan. I never forgot Japan. So about 15 years from the time we left, we came back to Japan with a vision to plant a church. And that is what we're doing now.